We've been keeping our more precious items in your family's care for hundreds of years. Samson and Tamas both looked shocked. The animals that they had been scared of and worrying about for a year actually turned out to be longtime family friends. Samson leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. It was a bit much to take in. After a moment, she opened them. "We honestly thought you had taken our parents from us," said Samson to Martin. "We've been teaching the children to watch out for you and to be wary of your friends for a year. We had no idea you were friends with our family or a part of our history." Martin just beamed at her. "It's all right, child. We know what it's like to be disliked, but you've never had anything to fear from us, and we only want to help you with your parents' disappearance. That's why we brought Chibri over to Samuel," said Martin. He pointed at Chibri, who smiled at everyone and hugged Samuel glowing blue as she did so. "Other than finding something we desperately found, she's going to help look for your parents. It's the least we can do with all your family has done for our kind." Tamas and Samson looked at him. "Thank you for being willing to help us," said Tamas. He looked at Chibri, who nodded at them both. Averly had been playing with the paper while they spoke. Each time she traced her claw along the shape of one of the symbols, little blue specks of blue light followed her movements. She was entranced. She repeated the motion over and over, watching the light trail up behind it. She stopped tracing the symbol and looked at Martin. "Are there any spells that will let me find someone, or at least help me locate where they have been so I can find their trail?" asked Averly. Martin closed his eyes for a moment, recalling one of the many spells he knew, and opened them again. "There are a few like that, but they're limited in power. The most powerful require an item from the animal you're looking for and point you in the direction the linked animal is traveling. I can show you a basic locating spell that will get you started off on the right track if you like." The paper that Averly was holding flew out of her paws and landed back in front of Martin. He pulled the magic pen from his sleeve once again and placed it on the paper. Immediately it moved to the lower section of the paper and started to draw symbols in purple ink. It drew with incredible speed. The pen moved to the side of the paper and tucked itself under the corner of it and flipped it over and began furiously scrawling once again. They sat and watched it move down the page, transfixed by its motion. It finished shortly and laid back down again. Martin placed the pen back up his sleeve and made a pushing motion with his hoof. The paper lifted up, twirling in the air, and landed back in front of the wolf cub. She smiled at him. "Thank you for that," said Averly. "I'm going to learn that one straight away," she thought. She looked at the symbols that had been freshly written. They were much more complicated than either the clerico or the correspondence spell, but she made up her mind to learn that one as quickly as she possibly could. "I'm coming for you," she thought to herself. She rolled up the paper and placed it in her pocket. She went back to scrawling out the symbols she had been practicing on the table with one claw. Light traced behind her as she did so. "So we need to go to the Tanzeria, to the Amberstone house to find Averly's garnet, right?" asked Samuel. "Yes, that's true. You'll have to find the house steward and get them to let you in, so you'll be able to find the treasure." "It shouldn't be too difficult," said Martin. He drew another rectangle on the table and another piece of paper puffed into existence in a cloud of green smoke. The pen once again came from his robe and stood at the ready on the page. "This letter should explain to them what is going on and what you'll need," said Martin. The pen wrote on in dark red ink. Once it was done, it leaned against the page and producing a small puddle of iridescent ink. Martin placed a hoof in the ink, stamping his signature on the page. The ink dried instantly as he touched it. Upon removal from the page, a pair of cloven marks with the name Martin O'Dim scrawled and scribbled underneath them appeared. Martin smiled at the stamp and placed the pen back up his sleeve. He shook the letter a little, drying the rest of the ink instantly, rolled it up and gave it to Samuel. Samuel took the rolled letter and placed it inside his jacket pocket for safekeeping. "You're going to have to present the steward, I think his name is Jeffries, if I'm not mistaken, the letter. He'll help you out once he's made sure of its authenticity," said Martin. "That's right. He's the family's main helper and lived with us most of our lives until we moved into the forest," said Samsa. "He used to make us tea and read to us when Mum and Dad were at the library late at night. He's a lovely old wombat," she thought back on him fondly. "I hope he's doing well taking care of the house. So he'll know what to do?" asked Samuel. "Oh, sure. He's been one of us for years," said Martin. "You're kidding," replied Tamas. Martin's smile widened ever so slightly and he nodded slowly. "Oh, yes, very dedicated little wombat, if I do say. He'll read the letter and you'll be able to help you find your trinket, Averly. I'm sure he's got plenty of them lying around someplace. We do make an awful lot of them at times throughout the years." He rubbed his chin scruff contemplatively. Averly looked at Martin and smiled. "You think I'll have choices to pick from?" asked Averly. "Well, there will be choices most likely, but you're going to go for the garnet I told you of. It's important that you start off with the one because it's the easiest way to focus your magic with a stone like that, judging by the shape and size of your marking," said Martin, his eyes staring deeply into her. Averly lowered her gaze to the table. "Sorry, I was just excited about the idea of having a collection to pick from," said Averly sulkily. "I'd never had my own jewelry before." Martin's smile widened further, showing his oddly large square teeth. "It's all right, child. I know that much. But it's important that you stick with the basics before you pick up some ruly habits and make a mess of your lessons. Those 3 spells should start you off well. Did you notice how there were 3 different color inks that produced them? Martin asked her. Yes, I did. I thought it was just to tell them apart, said Avery. Martin shook his head. No, that's not at all what it's for, dear, he said, clapping his cloven hooves together. It tells you the type of magic that it uses to be completed. Blue magic is the easiest, so I gave you the clerical spell. Then there's the green correspondence spell, green being the second easiest, and finally the purple locating spell. That one combines runes from both red and blue magic, and should be roughly twice as difficult as the first 2 to learn. But because you're using a garnet, it should naturally be aided in focusing on the runes, so it may be slightly easier than if you were to use some other jewel, said Martin. Ailey patted the pocket the roll of paper was resting in. Well, that makes sense, said Avery. Thanks for sharing those with me. I wouldn't know where to start otherwise. I know. You shouldn't have much trouble once you get started, and I would ask to see the library in the house if you can. Tanzeria is a magical place. A few of our sects came together hundreds of years ago and founded the city as a safe place for magic users to gather and learn their crafts, said Martin. He looked at Barkland. There's a tavern there that I need you to go to. The Toadstool. It's run by a friend of mine, a toad named Roland. He's going to get you on the right path to the task we need you to complete. He'll have more information for you than I can give. Please say hello to his wife for me, said Martin. Barkland looked at Avery. Got it. We'll head there after we go to the Amberstone, said Barkland. Samuel and Rose looked at one another, and Samuel said, What is it that you want us to do exactly with Chibri? What can you tell us about these old weapons? Martin pulled on his beard slightly and hummed. Well, the way we see it, since you're one of the chosen animals that can interact with a contained nether walker like Chibri there, said Martin. He pointed at the floating flame. She smiled at them all and waved slightly. Her arm then disappeared back into her body as she came and sat back down against her chair. We want you to go and find the ancient weapons from the past wars so we can make sure they're hidden for safekeeping. Our foresters have seen some troubling things on the horizon, and we're worried someone or something is trying to find one of these weapons to use against the peaceful animals of the lands. We had hundreds of years of relative peace across the entire world, other than a few small spats here and there, and we can't let something like the weaponry find its way back to someone who would use it to destroy innocent lives and corrupt the easily swayed, said Martin. Martin looked pensive for a moment, and then a smile broke out along his face as he smoothed his beard with one cloven hoof. But we're pretty sure you'll be able to find it and get it back to us so we can hide it away properly again. There's only so many places most non-magic and magic users alike can go before they realize they've been set on the wrong path and misdirected, said Martin, and his smile widened. There are plenty of those that can never even tell they've been misdirected in the first place. A few of the rams laughed at his joke. Rose looked over at the other table and for a moment saw that intermixed with the ram were a collection of sheep as well. That makes sense, she thought to herself. She looked at Martin uneasily. Why is that so funny? Rose asked. Martin shrugged. I'm not sure. I don't get our sense of humor sometimes, said Martin. His smile broke out into a grin as he winked an oblong eye at Rose. We stopped trying to figure it out years ago. Doesn't mean anything bad, though, said Martin. So the 5 of us are going to travel to Tanzeria and then what? Asked Barkland. Martin began stroking his beard once again. It seemed to help him concentrate. Well, that's up to Ro, I would think. He has a much better idea of what's going on than I do. Our job was to find Chibri and bring her to you folks. I thought it was nice of me to offer to help young Avery, though. One Sunday to another, said Martin, puffing out his cheeks and blowing out a thin stream of air. Avery blushed slightly and agreed. Much more than nice, sir. Thank you again, said Avery. Martin seemed to take no notice of the wolf and pointed to Chibri's small metal lantern on the table in front of Samuel. You're going to need this. This lantern is the summoning home of Chibri and where she lives when it's raining or when she needs to be resting, or is sick of being around other beings, said Martin. He opened the lantern and showed them what was inside. We even built in the little fireproof curtains so she can have some privacy when she wants it, and so she doesn't keep you up all night. Samuel looked at the lantern. Do I keep it in my bag or carry it around with me? Asked Samuel. Chibri answered, It's small enough to go on your belt, so I would ask that you carry it there with the door facing outward so I can easily get in and out where I want to. It barely weighs anything, so it shouldn't bother you too much. Samuel thought about that. That seems fine with me. That's not going to get hot and burn me, is it? Chibri and Martin looked at one another and laughed. Not likely, said Martin. Chibri wiped small blue flames from her eyes and stifled another laugh. It's to meet the house the eternal flame of the lesser fire gods. It couldn't be more flame-proof, said Chibri. She looked at Samuel, who was slightly taken aback by their laughter. No, it will never burn you. It can't. Besides, you get used to it soon enough, and you won't even know I'm in there, said Chibri. Samuel smiled. That's good. I was worried for a moment there, said Samuel. Then he laughed a little himself. Rose looked out across the table back to the house. There were still little orange ringed eyes showing through underneath the curtain. She turned to Samson and Tamas. I think they're still up watching us, said Rose, pointing towards the window. The curtain closed abruptly and the eyes disappeared. We'd better go check on them, said Tamas, and got up from the table and went inside. All right. he could be heard saying as the door shut behind them. Samson turned her head to the sky and noticed the light creeping in from the east. A dark night had reached a pale blue hue beneath its inky coloring. It's getting late. I think I'll head inside and make sure they're going to bed, said Sansa. She got up and followed Tamas's lead into the house. She closed the door quietly behind her. Moments later, the lights in the large room with all the bunk beds extinguished. Shortly, Tamas came back out and returned to the table. They wouldn't go to sleep unless one of us stayed with them, and said Tamas. They're a little freaked out about being alone for a few hours tonight. They'd never been on their own before. That's understandable, said Rose. They did a good job keeping quiet while we were chatting, said Barklin. Rose agreed with him. Tamas turned back to Martin. Is there anything else you need to tell us? Asked Tamas. Martin thought on it for a moment, closing his eyes. He kept them closed long enough that Averly began to wonder if he had fallen asleep accidentally. Just as she was about to call his name to check to see if he was awake, his eyes snapped open. Nothing else comes to mind, said Martin. The blue light from the east spread further west. Martin peered at it from under the canopy. Looks like morning is coming, said Martin. We'd better clear out of here before it gets too light. Got places to be and spells to do. He winked at Averly. Averly smiled back at him. Martin stood up from the table. At the same time, the other rams and sheepfolk did the same behind him in one unanimous movement. He reached out a cloven hoof to Chibri. An arm materialized and reached out to him. They shook. It was a pleasure binding you to that lantern and getting you to your protector, said Martin, pointing at Samuel. The pleasure's all yours, said Chibri tartly. Martin laughed again. So it was, said Martin, the grin returning to his face. In any case, for letting us get you over here and helping these kids on their adventure, we wouldn't be able to do it without you, and it's been a lot of fun. Chibri lowered her arm, it disappeared as she did so, and turned to Samuel. I know this is a lot to handle all at once, but we've got a job to do, and I'm glad to finally found you, Protector, said Chibri. She hugged Samuel again. I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of hijinks we get up to while we're traveling, said Chibri. Samuel looked at her and smiled, the warmth from her hug radiating over his body and making it tingle where she had touched him. Me too. This is going to be something different, said Samuel. Rose, Averly, and Barklin all turned and smiled at Martin, who grinned back even wider than before. We're glad to have met you, said Averly. Barklin and Rose both nodded. You folks are going to have a lot of fun in your travels, said Martin. It'll be a story you tell your kids someday. He winked at Samuel and Rose. They both blushed at him. He looked up at the sky again. Well, we better get going, if we're going to make it back before first light, said Martin. It was fantastic meeting you, Samuel, and shook his paw generously, almost causing the otter to bounce off his feet as he did so. Martin let go of his paw, moved to Rose, and shook her almost as hard as he had shook Samuel. He let her go and moved over to Averly and gave her a hug. He leaned in and whispered into her ear, You be good, you understand, child. You'll do great things if you put the work in, and we'll be telling your story to our disciples for years to come. I'm sure of it. I hope you're right, thought Averly to herself. She said nothing but smiled at him and thanked him again, patting the pocket with the spells in it. Martin released her from the hug and moved over to Barklin. Make sure you check out the Amberstone's library before you go to the bar. It's very important that you do so. Once you go to the bar, you won't be able to go anywhere else until Roe allows it, alright? He patted Barklin on the back and moved away from them all, down the length of the table, to stand at the end of it. The other robed animals moved behind him silently. It was wonderful meeting you all, and I know you'll do many fine things on your adventures. Averly, if you ever need to chat, just use the correspondence spell. I've added my names to the runes at the bottom of the spell, so it'll allow you to send messages directly to me if you want. I would be happy to help answer any questions you have, and I may have some good information for you if I'm able to help. It was a pleasure, said Martin. He waved his arms out and stepped back 3 spaces, the group behind him doing the same thing simultaneously, and, in a puff of blue smoke, they were gone. The last thing to go were the square teeth of his grinning smile. The travelers looked at one another and Rose sighed. That was something I thought I would never see, said Rose. She yawned. Barklin and Averly yawned in response. I think it's time we take a nap before we have to get up and head to the city, said Averly, rubbing her eye gently with a closed fist. The others agreed. They wished Tamas a good night, and the 4 of them got up from the table. Chibri floated from the bench she was sitting on and stood next to Samuel. Samuel looked at her with curiosity. Do you sleep? Samuel asked her. Chibri looked back up at him and smiled. Of course I do, but it's more like waiting around for the next day to begin more than anything. Things get quiet until I wake up again, unless I'm dreaming of my old home, said Chibri. What's it like in another plane of existence? Barklin asked, stifling another yawn with the back of his paw. Ethereal, said Chibri, and giggled. They made their way around to the front of the building, being careful not to wake the sleeping animals inside. They heard a door open and close quietly as they passed. Tamas had gone inside, presumably to get some sleep. As they reached their tents around the fire pit, which had gone out while being unattended during their discussion, Chibri stopped Samuel by pulling on his coat gently. Samuel stopped for a moment and asked her what was wrong. May I sleep in the tent with you? I won't take up much room, and I'll shut the curtains with the lantern so you won't even know I'm there, asked Chibri. Samuel agreed. Sure you don't snore, do you? Samuel asked the floating flame. Chibri giggled. Well, I don't have a nose, so I doubt I do. I'm not sure though. I tend to lose sight of myself while I'm sleeping until I'm woken up by something. I just know that I prefer to sleep in the lantern because it's more comfortable than doing it like this, said Jabri, and she pointed to her own roiling body. And it's easier on everyone else because I won't keep the camp lit up all night.
Okay, well, I'm taking a break, so I might as well do some ads. This is my first one, so bear with me. So, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. That's pretty cool. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And all you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Please visit anchor.fm/divergentmind to leave a message so that I may get back to you. Thank you. Have a nice day. So Anchor is asking me to ask you to support me financially. I would ask that you go to my Patreon to do that, which is patreon.com/divergentmind. It means you can either become a monthly subscriber at a different tier of $1 to $3 to $5. I'm not looking for a lot. I'm not asking for a lot. I'm not asking for anything. This is going to go to the end of my podcast. I don't like it when podcasts straight up ask you for money when I'm doing okay. Well, I'm not doing okay. I'm surviving now to the point that I can make this. I would love to be able to make improvements to this by, say, getting... So basically, I'm running off an iPad, and I would like to improve it by getting different things that would make it better. Maybe some headphones that monitor output, or a better mic. Though the mic I got was from JWife, so I might not even use the better mic. You know what I mean? It's all about whatever I need at the time, but really it's just to get healthy again, because I'm currently over 300 pounds and I don't want to die that young. I would really like to be able to afford some vegetables so I can go back to my vegetarian diet, because being this big sucks. And I'm happy to sit in a chair all day, but I really got to walk my butt off, literally. So that's what the money would be for. It would be for healthy food, because I can't afford it. I can afford ramen and pasta and rice and beans, but I can't live on carbs, because that's how you get this big on antipsychotics. Junk food and carbs, which is just cheap and plentiful around me. So I would like to leave my house and just lose some weight. And to do that, I would like to go to the store and buy some vegetables, please. But you don't have to do anything. I'm not asking you to. I'm not begging. I'll figure it out on my own. Much pleasure, Jay.